Arthur 11, former Marine infantryman, Revolutionary War reenactor, amateur history enthusiast. I'm also a collector of antique firearms, and that's what this video is about today. I'm going to be unboxing my latest auction win. So yeah, let's get started. I picked this up off of Live Auctioneers. I won the auction at $1,900, and in total it cost me about $2,800 with the buyer's premium included, shipping and handling, taxes, all that other stuff. What did I buy? I bought, well, they marketed it as a model 1763 rifled musket, I think is what they call it at the top of the head. It's not rifled, but it is a musket, and I think it's a model 1766. It's made at Saint Etienne, but yeah, let's get to it. It is inside of a gun sleeve. That's quite nice to happen. So here's the musket inside of a gun sleeve. I now have my stand set up for me to put it on it. It came from an estate sale. The gentleman that owned this before was deeply involved in the Historical Society of Florida, if I remember correctly. But yeah, so this is my first viewing of this beautiful 1766 model French musket. And there's something kind of unique about this. And let's see if you can notice. So here it is. Do that first initial inspection. There, the stock is quite chipped, but that's been repaired. Ooh, okay. That's interesting. I'm looking over it from right to left. We have that classic 1766 high comb right here and that deep groove that goes back. I already have a 1766, and as we go right to left, oh no, it's a split stock. Look at that. They didn't even tell me about that. So that's not how it's supposed to be, but so that stock right there is cut down, comes right off. Let's see if we can pull this. Goes to half cock. That's full cock. Push that forward. I'm pretty sure this is the original stock for at least this part of the gun. It's got that that high comb, not as high as a 1763, but as high as a 1766. I also have a model 1766, so I'll be able to compare this musket to the one I have that was made at Charleville. This one is pretty cool, mainly because of where it's made. Let's see if we can get that in nice and close. So this is made at the Royal Armory in Saint Etienne. Saint Etienne, Maubeuge, and Charleville were the Royal Armories during the 1760s. Toul would join it later on, as best I can recall. And another thing about that lock plate right there, as we're looking at it, you can see the initials HB. HB is for Henri Blanc. Henri Blanc was a French gunsmith who was working at Saint Etienne from the mid-1760s till about 1774, from what I've read. And he was actually instrumental in kind of progressing towards parts interchangeability. He would work with de Grubevald for the model of 1777. And he also has a connection with Thomas Jefferson, if I remember correctly. So that's pretty cool. You can see that his, what I've seen online is that is his mark, the H and the B with the crown above it. I plan to do a Flintlock Friday about this Flintlock to kind of cover it more. The rest of it, you have the common characteristics of a model 1766. You have the butt plate coming over, and you have a screw on top. You have your two screws right here holding it in. And then, as with most guns, you're going to have your initials carved in. So I'm pretty sure See, GT right there, that you can see that. That's probably the initial of the soldier that had it. And then there's an IC, and I feel like I've seen IC before on French guns as like an inspector's mark, but it could also just be another soldier that carried this gun. So those are the initials of the man that had this Flintlock firearm. It's stocked in European walnut. This walnut is very, very dark. It is in, as you can see, this is in quite a fair condition, and we're going to get to the barrel because if let's just say the barrel is only 40 inches, and if you know your French infantry muskets for the model 1763-66, that's going to be an issue. You have a flat side plate with rounded screws holding that in together with the lock on the other side. You have a flat lock and you have a flat reinforced cock. Reinforced means it has these two springs. It's not like an S or a snake that you would see on earlier French guns or in common with the English guns at the time. You have a flat continuous hammer right there. It's pretty loose. The patina for the entire gun looks to be consistent. There is a part that did stand out to me, and that is here on the pan. Most of the pans, this seems like it's either been reworked at some point, and that would make sense because as we go through the gun, we're going to see that this barrel is not original to the gun. But this pan, that metal work around it seems to be almost kind of crude compared to the other French musket. And we have our lower sling swivel, which is separate of your trigger guard. We move forward, and as we move forward, you can see that there's no spring to hold in this lower barrel band. It is held in by tension. And that would be correct for the model, well, for the 1766. The first one's made in 1766, also 1767 would have had it like this. And then later on, I'll pull on my other Flintlock made at Charlottesville, and we'll compare them because they're the same model essentially, but made at two different armories. So there's going to be little differences between them and there. And then you have your middle sling swivel. And then you have the fact that the stock is cut. So that seems to be a straight cut. So I wonder if this was cut to fit inside of a duffel bag. I'll have to reach out to Ethan Woods from 11 Bang Bang because he's ran into this before. And I also have another gun that was redone that was also cut in about the same spot, but they actually tied it back together. We have our upper band nose cap with that brass front sight post. You have a bayonet lug on the bottom, and we have a trumpet style of rammer. Okay, so that is just a general overview of this French model 1766. Well, it's not really a model 1766 anymore. To prove that point, we're going to be breaking out the other French infantry musket I have, and we're going to compare them, and you're going to be able to see what is going on. All right, here we are. We have the two French muskets next to each other. In the front, we have my French infantry musket, a model of 1766 with the 68 and I think 70 improvements. That has to do with the location of this lower spring that is holding in the lower barrel band. As you can see, this lower barrel band is not held in by spring. And when I say spring, I mean you press down on this and that will be able to move that barrel band forward. The location of also the bayonet lug for a 1766 is on the bottom, or for the 68 and then the 70, the bayonet lug is on top. So when the French were actually building these muskets out of their many, many different factories, they just called it the system of 1766 because there were so many modifications going through them. And when they first started out with the model 1763. And then they find that to be too heavy. They use the lock from the Dragoon, which is what both of these have. It's this much smaller lock than the 1763s. And then they also lighten the barrel, and then they lighten the stock of the gun. 1763, they're very, 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 very hard to find. The only one I've ever seen in real life is they actually have one at Colonial Williamsburg in their art museum. They have a 1763 down there. And it's pretty cool to look at, actually, because most of them were about 88,000 of the 1763s were made, and they were mostly converted into the Leger or the Light, the 1766, at the same time that they were building the model of 1766. Hopefully you can kind of keep all that in your head. So what I was kind of curious is, I was wondering if this was a 1763 lock that had been completely worked down. But no, it seems to just be a model of 1766 that was made at Saint Etienne. And just a short overview of the history of the gun, about 110,000 at least were sent to America during the American War of Independence or the American Revolution. The French provided these guns. We paid about $5 per piece. Benjamin Franklin was in France, and he was him and Silas Deane were one of the people that was able to get this
all these arms flowing over, and the French are basically emptying their armory of some of these 1763s, the 66s. So the French are actually just giving America a gun on credit for about $5. So it was a pretty good deal for the fledgling United States. War makes strange bedfellows, and the French wanted to provide the Americans with firearms, and amongst a lot of the other support they provided to the American forces during the American Revolution. One of them was guns, to include this. You see these ones quite common, these French infantry muskets made at Charleville. And they are usually, well, the collector term would be like a 1768. And the 1768 just means that there's that lower spring on that lower barrel band, and then you also have your bayonet lug on the top. The Saint Etienne's, I don't really see that many of them come up for auction. Like I said, usually you're going to see guns made at Charleville. There are so many guns made at Charleville that they actually, and that's kind of like where the misnomer of calling these all Charlevilles come from. Charleville was never a pattern of gun. Charleville was just a factory in France that made muskets. Saint Etienne made muskets, Maubeuge made muskets, and then later Toul would make muskets. And they're all kind of collectively known on the American side of the pond as Charlevilles, but that's not historically accurate to what they would have been called at the time. They would have just been called French muskets, or light muskets being for the 1766, or heavy muskets being for the 1763. If you watch my videos, you know I talk about this a lot, because now I have 2 original French muskets, plus like 4 reproductions. So I've been going down this rabbit hole of French muskets for quite some time. What is wrong with my French musket made at Saint Etienne? I think you should be able to see, but yeah, look at that. This has a 40-inch barrel, whereas it should have a 44-inch barrel. The 44-inch barrel is what they would have left about 44 to 45, 44 and a half, around those measurements. It kind of moves around a little bit. But yeah, so it should have had a 44-inch barrel. Also, it was rounded. If we come back to the breech of the barrel, you can see that this French infantry musket, the model of 1766 with the 68 and the 70 improvements made at Charleville, has a rounded, the barrel is rounded towards the breech. You also have that D with a star, that is your inspector's mark. See if I can get that out the light. Yeah. Actually, when I bought this gun, I didn't know it had that mark on it, so I was very happy to get it. And then the gun on top, you can see that it is not rounded. It is an octagon. There's also one very obvious clue that this is not from the American Revolutionary War era, is there's 1811 right there on the breech of the barrel. That is probably why I only spent about $2,800 for a French musket that can trace its way back to the American Revolutionary War era. All right, so let's kind of talk about this 1811 mark on the barrel. So I saw that and I was like, well, I collect French muskets, so I might as well have a historical one. And it doesn't look like it was reconverted from percussion, so that's nice. Well, what's reassuring for me is I was able to find pictures of barrels made at Saint Etienne with that same sort of script on it, the B and the P, and that very cursive-y script. I'm a collector of French muskets as well as American military muskets made at the armories. Also, I kind of look at contractor guns quite a bit. America basically copied the 1766 with the 68 and the 70 improvements when we made our first musket, which was known as the Charleville, which is also where the name Charleville kind of comes from, that nomenclature. Story for another day. But that cursive script and that 1811 I was able to find on other French musket barrels that were made at the Saint Etienne factory. Okay, what else do we know about that? So this has an 1811 barrel, and it also has a Model 9 nose cap. There's actually a G right there. What is the Model 9? Well, the Model 9 is a continuation of the model of 1777, and this nose cap is much more distinctive than compared to the nose cap that would have been on the gun originally when it came from the American Revolution era. So here we can see the distinction between the two nose caps. You can just look at the angle of how this swoops back and then how it is flat up here on the nose cap. It's kind of hard to see. I know the lighting's not perfect. I apologize. And then over here, it kind of has this groove to it. And that would make sense because they put on a Model 9 barrel, which is shorter than the 44-inch barrel, and they use a different nose cap. I also am fortunate to own another French musket. This is a French Model 9 made at Versailles Armory. It could have been made in 1810 to 1820 thereabout. And you can see that this shares the same style of nose cap and basically the same barrel. It also is octagonal at the back, except for this one doesn't have any date for when the barrel was made. But the cool thing about it, I was able to track down that DT was a barrel inspector or a maker at Versailles during the 18 teens. So he could have been there. This gun could have been used in the Napoleonic War or right soon after. So I was able to track this down to being, all right, so we know it's a Model 9 type nose cap. And the final kind of really interesting thing about this barrel, which is quite reassuring, is that I'm pretty convinced that this is the original stock. The tang for the Model 9 type barrel is actually smaller than the tang of a other 1770 or 1766 barrel. So what did they do? Well, they actually filled in the channel on the wood stock with, it looks like, it appears to be cement. So yeah, they just took out the 44 they took out the original 44 around that inch barrel and they swapped it out for this 40-inch Model 9 barrel that was made in 1811. So yeah, you can see the cement right there. With this information, this is kind of where I think the gun is in the best case scenario. I could be completely wrong. This could have been Bubba and someone was just really good at it. We can believe that it was made at Saint Etienne in about 1766, in the early part of their locks when they were making. I was able to use some reference books, and that looks like a very early lock. We know that Henri Blanc worked there from I read online, I haven't been able to find this in a book, from 1764 to 1774. So that's pretty cool to have his initials there, to have that connection to that history. It then was, I'm going to assume it stayed in France. Now, hear me out on this. 1811 is like the peak of the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleonic Wars have been going on since the early 1800s, the French Revolutionary Wars before that. So France, by 1811, had been fighting for about 15 to 18 years, and I'm assuming they needed as many guns as they could get. So they took this 1766 musket that was made at Saint Etienne, and maybe it was still at Saint Etienne, maybe it was stored there, and then they swapped out the barrel for the new upgraded Model 9 barrel, and then they just filled in that gap in the stock between the barrel tang and the stock with cement. They swapped out the front nose cap for the Model 9 nose cap. And I don't know if it would have been issued to frontline troops or maybe rear line troops or gendarmes or something like that. But that is kind of the interesting thing about these guns, is you can kind of put together a story, but you'll never really quite know. Oh, also, the pan. I do think that pan was reworked. And I will take the gun apart and I'll look at the inside of it. But it looked like it was like redone at the time. These ones did not have interchangeable pans or replaceable pans. They actually get those with the 1777 is the first to have those brass pans that are less corrosive, and you can actually swap them out. So that's always a big step for the flintlock, military flintlock, but looks like somebody actually replaced this pan. So was this reworked at the Saint Etienne Arsenal? I don't know. Well, that's kind of a best case scenario for me as a collector. What do you guys think? Is there something that stands out to it? Do you think I'm missing the mark on this? And yeah, just let me know what your opinions are there down below. Overall, I'm decently happy with the buy. It was cost me under $3,000 to get it, but I do collect original French muskets. I was able to get an original French musket for under $3,000. Not in the best condition. This is quite a fair, heavy use condition for a flintlock. But again, it's 265 years old or something around there. So it's been around for a lot longer than we have been. So 260 years, not 65. Math for Marines. But yeah, so thanks for joining me on another unboxing video. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Do you think I'm off the mark? If you see anything that stands out to you, also leave that down below. And I've been able to, thankfully, there was a comment on one of the mystery musket video, and they sent me down the path to figure out that the French musket that I had called the mystery musket actually has a Versailles barrel. And it could actually have been the whole thing was built at the Versailles factory during the era of the 18 teens. So yeah, I'm here to learn alongside with you. So thanks for tuning in. And until next time, take care.